Hey y'all, welcome. My name is Shauna Renee. This is Coco Mode 2.0, and this is episode 2. Before I get into it, I just want to say hey again, and that I hope you all had a fantastic week. It was a good one for me. The last 24 hours have been a bit challenging, especially as I tried to get this episode on. As you know, my original plan, was to go live on Thursday at 9:30 p.m. There were a couple of obstacles in my way to going live. One of which I did my best to get over, through, under, and around. The other one was something that I could not help. And I think I'm going to go into all of that because there's some stuff that I really want to talk to you about in relation to the show. But I think I'm going to do that on Instagram. I'm not going to do that right now because I don't want to take up any extra time. So if you are not following me on Instagram, I am at Shauna Renee underscore IG. So if you would, please follow me on Instagram. I also have another ask of you, and that is to like this video if you like it. Subscribe to the page. Please subscribe to the page. I need a lot more subscribers before I can do what I really want to do in this space. And also share this with anyone that you think might find it interesting, entertaining, or helpful. This episode and the page just in general. Okay. So yeah, getting back to the difficulty, the challenge that I had getting this together. I don't know if any of you are star watchers or astrologers, or maybe you consult astrologers on a regular basis. But Mercury is in retrograde. And when Mercury goes into retrograde, three things usually happen. Communication with those that you love and care about becomes very difficult, but communication in general becomes very difficult. Technology just fails. If whatever can go wrong goes wrong, especially as it relates to technology. The other thing that typically happens during retrograde is travel is a little dicey. Oh, and then there's one more thing. This always happens during retrograde. Your ex is gonna call you. Your ex is absolutely gonna call you during the Mercury retrograde. Promise you that. But what I was really concerned with was the fact that I was having a very difficult time with the technology. And obviously, this is a means of my communicating my ideas and opinions to you. So, yeah, it was like double the trouble. And it's funny because I have a good friend who is an astrologer, and she and I sit down and talk every now and again, either on the phone or we might go have coffee or something. And so a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to her and I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to just go ahead and move forward with the Coco Mo project because I've got 4 projects in the works right now. But I was like, I think I'm just going to go ahead and push forward with the Coco Mo 2.0. It's the easiest thing for me to do. I can do it alone and, whatever. So she's saying, well, I don't know. Maybe you should wait until October. And I'm like, I can't wait till October because I promise you something else will come up and I'll never get it done because that's just how my life works. I got to strike while the iron is hot. That's kind of the Leo in me, really. And she's like, but Mercury is going to go in retrograde. Not really a good time to launch a new project. I would wait. Girl, bye. I'm launching my project. So we launched Coco Mode 2.0 the day Mercury went retrograde. At least that was the day I think I finished the first episode. And then here we are in the midst of it. And yeah, sis, you were correct. But we are going to push through because that's what we do. So the title of this week's episode asks the question, is it time for Black folks to consider gentle parenting? And I'll be honest, this was not what I was going to talk about originally. This was not what I had been working on all week. I was working on a completely different show. We'll get to that on another week. But I was sitting down, scrolling through Twitter, as I often do on a daily basis. My job requires it. And I happened to come across a post. It was a retweet, actually. The person who retweeted this video is a well-known and respected journalist and author. I think accessory designer as well. And he retweets a video. And this video shows us an apartment that has been destroyed. I mean, destroyed. Stuff all over the place, curtains pulled down from the windows, glass smashed, mirrors smashed, toilet smashed. There was even a huge chunk of granite pulled off of the kitchen counter. It looked like a tornado had gone through there, or it looked like a crazy person had gone through with like a jackhammer and just destroyed the place. But according to the caption, the damage was done by a 12-year-old child who was upset about their phone being taken away from them. You've probably seen this video by now because it's made its rounds all throughout every single one of the social media platforms. Now, when I first saw this, and given who posted it, I was inclined to believe that in fact was the truth. But then I started to think to myself, nope, can't be. There's no way a 12-year-old child could do all of this damage. It's impossible. Unless, this 12-year-old child was the size of a grown man. It's impossible. And even then, I can't see how it's possible. Then I thought to myself, this couldn't also be over just a phone. Now, that's not to say that a child does not get angry. Children don't get angry when you take away their stuff. I have a child. I have a 16-year-old, and there was a time, certainly when he was 12 years old, where I had to take stuff away from him. I had to, phones, video games. I had to prevent him from, if he wanted to go out, he couldn't go out. This is what we do when we raise children. Right or wrong, we'll get into that later. But I thought to myself, no, this isn't about a phone. There's more to this. Because, just think about the level of anger one must feel in order to do that level of damage. That kind of damage requires like a rush of adrenaline that you just don't get because somebody's taken something away from you as a child. You know what happens when children get angry and they can't regulate their emotions. They throw temper tantrums. My 12-year-old, well, he's not 12 anyway, but when he was 12, he threw a temper tantrum. He stormed up the stairs, just slammed his door, that kind of thing. But to tear up the entire house with no regard to the fact that they also live here, just imagine how angry someone has to be in order to do that. So I wasn't buying it. So I said, okay, I'm just curious. Let me do a little more research. And by research, what I mean is I took my cell phone and I just scrolled down a little further. And I saw that the woman who posted the video, I don't know if she retweeted it from somewhere else. I'm not sure. But the woman who was retweeted by this journalist said, hey, actually, this is not about a 12-year-old not wanting their phone. This damage was done by a 15-year-old who was experiencing a mental health episode. They were in crisis. Then further down in the post, you see a video. There's a video from the mother of this 15-year-old who says, he's not 12. This had nothing to do with his cell phone. He's 15. He's got some major mental issues. And I just didn't know what to do. It happened, and now I'm in trouble because this is an apartment and I am going to have to repair or pay for the damage. And she was asking for people to help. Now, it only took me 1 second, maybe 3 seconds, and one swipe to get to this information. It was right there. Obviously, other folks didn't have the time, the energy, the desire to do that much work to kind of determine exactly what was going on. Maybe it's because other folks didn't question what was happening. They just assumed that this is what a 12-year-old does when they get mad, or they assume that this is how kids are these days, because that's what someone said. The kids these days are entitled. They're out of control. They're spoiled. And of course, they started to blame the mother for it. Then you had other folks underneath this post that were like, oh, I would have whooped his ass into next next week. I would have got a switch. Oh, I would have, drop kicked him, into next year. And then even the journalist in the original post captioned it and said, oh, team whoop that ass would have been busy for a long time, implying that that's the way that they too would have handled this. A 12-year-old who destroyed a house would have just needed his ass whooped. That's what needed to have happened, because an ass whooping would have fixed whatever was wrong there. But see, here's the thing. We don't think in those terms. It's not about really solving the problem. Black folks, some of us, and I'm only going to speak for Black folks because I'm Black and I'm raising Black children and I was raised in a Black family. Black folks, excuse me, y'all. Black folks love bragging about violence, particularly against their children. We get off on that. Oh, my son said this to me. I beat his ass. Oh, I wish he would. I knock him. Oh, please, shit. I told that boy, you better go out there and get a switch. Girl, did you? Yes, girl. Did he bring you a switch? Yes, he brought me a big, thick one. And I'm telling you, I beat that ass. I did. Girl, I know you did. Girl, these kids is out of line. And it's not just girl. The men are doing it too. The men talk about beating ass too. Y'all love it. And then those of you who were raised in households and families like that, where you got beat with telephone cords and switches and belts, y'all start to have like the ass beating Olympics. Oh, my daddy used to beat me with a belt. A belt? Look at that, ain't nothing. My daddy used to beat me with a telephone cord. A telephone cord, man, you weak. My grandmama used to beat me with a switch. Like, y'all start bragging about how bad your beatings were. This is what we do in our community. We love this shit. So I wasn't surprised when I started to see all of that. I was a little disappointed, but I wasn't surprised. So I continued to do research, scrolling down. And I was pleased to see that there were some people who were like, let's stop for a moment and ask a question here. What's really going on? Because this seems like a lot for just having a phone taken away. And of course, folks were like, no, I believe it because these kids are entitled. These kids need their ass beat. This is the problem. This is with this generation. They don't get ass beatings, Okay. So somebody else later on tries again. Well, maybe there's like something more. Maybe this child has some kind of mental health condition. No, I ain't nothing about no mental health condition. It's just these kids are just so bad. These kids, something wrong with these kids. It's the problem. These kids don't go outside. The problem is these kids be on these phones too long. Problem is these kids watching television and stuff and YouTube and being on the Facebook. That's the problem with these kids. So you had all of that. Because some of y'all are like that. I swear to God, some of y'all think an ass whooping and an hour outside playing in the street is going to solve every damn problem we have in our society. But whatever. You have a right to believe what you want to. Anyway, I continue to research and scroll, and I come across someone who asks very simply, where is gentle parenting TikTok? Can the gentle parents stand up? I need help in here, meaning in the comments. And I was like, oh, there they are. Now, I don't know if any of you are familiar with gentle parenting, like as a thing. Like, gentle parenting is actually a parenting philosophy. And I don't know how long it's been around. I actually did some like legit research on this, and I couldn't really find a definitive date, like when it became a thing or when this style of parenting was labeled gentle parenting. But one thing that I know from spending time on TikTok especially, more and more Black parents are starting to practice gentle parenting. They're adopting these methods in raising their children. And when I see them talk about it on TikTok, inevitably, there are people who disagree with the philosophy altogether. Regardless of their level of understanding, they believe that gentle parenting raises weak and. But for the most part, under these posts, there are a lot of folks who, I hope you can still hear me. There are a lot of folks who absolutely agree with the form of parenting. All right, I want y'all to give me 1 second. I need to check something 1 second here to make sure we are still where we need to be. All right, I think we're good to go. Yes? Are we good to go? Okay. So, I wanted to, during this conversation, talk to you a little bit about gentle parenting. I wanted to give you some information on gentle parenting, starting with the goal of gentle parenting. And this is according to a website about it, that the goal of gentle parenting is to raise confident, independent, and happy children, which in my opinion should be the goal of every parent, no matter what philosophy you're using to parent your children. The major difference between gentle parenting and what, for the sake of this conversation, I'm going to call regular parenting, is that gentle parenting sort of shifts the focus away from the reward and punishment style of parenting. Most of us who are of a certain age were raised that way. We were rewarded for the things that we did well, if we were lucky. Some of us, I understand, were not. And we were punished for doing things that were not, for doing wrong things, or for not doing what we were supposed to do, right? And I'm sure almost all of us were. So if you got good grades, you got to go out to your favorite restaurant for dinner. If you got bad grades or you failed to clean up your room, then your phone or your video game was taken away. You couldn't go outside and play after school or over the weekend. This was how we were raised. And I don't know that there's anything wrong with that, because the truth is, in the real world, you are rewarded for doing well. You're paid at work for doing what you're supposed to do. If you do it well, you get a bonus. And if you don't do what you're supposed to do, then you're punished. Either you're written up, or you're docked pay, or at work, you're fired at worst. So there is a part of life, this reward and punishment cycle is very much a part of life, but it is not all that there is. It serves us well, like in our professional lives, but it absolutely does not serve us well in our personal lives, especially in our relationships. My God. Because what the reward and punishment style fails to do is teach us how to self-regulate. It doesn't develop a level of understanding. You don't always understand why you can or cannot do something, because more often than not, as a child, it wasn't even explained to you. You were just told not to do it because I said so. And if you obeyed, you got what you wanted. And if you didn't, it was taken away from you. There was no real understanding why. Now, maybe as you became an adult, as you got older, life taught you. Life is a hell of a teacher. The things life taught me, I would have much rather been taught by my parents. Trust and believe. And I don't blame my parents because they did the best that they did. And I think my parents did a phenomenal job. And, my mother and father could never have imagined all of the things that I would encounter in life. So, but I'm just saying, I wish that I had learned some of these things at home rather than out in the streets in life. Also, let me say, I was a very stubborn kid. So there was that too. But anyhow, I also know that when the fear of punishment or the promise of punishment is removed, forget about it. Forget about it. I remember going away to school, Howard. I left Detroit, went to DC, went to Howard. And the first 2 years, one of the things that stood out to me was the way that the young people who had been raised like really close to their parents, like the ones who had really tough parents and really strict upbringings, baby, buck wild when they got out from underneath their parents. Buck wild. Yes. And I'm telling the truth. I'm right. Even you parents know I'm right. These kids started tripping. The only thing that these kids knew how to do, these young people knew how to do really well, not the only thing, but one of the things that they knew how to do really well was to hide it. They learned how to hide the stuff that they were doing well enough so that they would not be punished. So yes, they got out from underneath their parents and the risk of punishment. They went buck wild. They went back home and just pretended like none of that was going on. But those of us who were out here day to day with them, oh baby, we knew because we was right there. In some instances, we were right there doing it with them. And for some of us, we didn't, because for some of us, it wasn't really, we understood that you don't want to do that because there are consequences to that. Or you don't want to do that because that's not going to really make you feel good about yourself. Like they hadn't learned that because no one had really taken the time to explain it to them. Now, I know some of you are like clenching your pearls and fanning yourself just because you are just hot with what I'm saying. Because gentle parenting just doesn't seem like something that would serve Black folks well. You know how we are, folks. We sit there and we watch the white people parent their children and we be like, they soft. That's why their kids running all over the place. That's why their kids yelling at us. That's why their kids cussing them out. Because they don't know how to discipline. I wish mine would. I wish mine would fall out in the middle of the grocery store like that. I would take his ass, snatch him up, take him to the car, beat his ass, make him wipe his face, and we come right back in here and I finish doing my shopping. By God, I wish he would. We do that. We do that. Now listen, I'm not going to sit here and say, though, that other cultures aren't a bit lax when it comes to parenting. I'm not going to say that there aren't other cultures that actually fear their children. And I think that's a big difference. I don't think it's the style of parenting. I think that there are cultures who actually fear their children. I think there are cultures where the mothers especially fear their sons. That's not the case in Black America. That's not the case in Black America. And I think that's a major difference, is fear. Not the style of parenting, the intention behind the parenting. Or I don't even know if that's fair to say, the intention behind the parenting. I think it's the spirit with which, like the spirit that the parent brings with them to the job. The spirit of fear as opposed to like a real true desire for their children to do well. But I know this can be very difficult for Black folks because for so long, since we've been on the shores of the Americas, we've had to be our children's number one protector. That is the goal of parenting for Black folks, to protect our children. Because there's so much for our children to be protected from. White supremacy, or the delusion of white supremacy and white savagery. There's also a lot of stuff going on in our own communities. We have to protect our children from our own. Hallelujah. There are predators running all over our own communities. And there's so many of us in our communities that just turn a blind eye to it. And so those of us who don't, well, we are having to protect our children from those kinds of things as well. We're having to protect our children from teachers who are disrespecting them. We have to protect our children from police. We have to protect our children from everything. So in some instance, it feels like as a Black parent, that should be your primary purpose. And you know, when you are in the midst of protecting, like when you are in that mode, you feel like, I just don't have time to explain everything. I'm telling you to get over here and shut your mouth because I need you to do that now. And I get that. So I don't want any of you listening to me thinking that I don't understand that I'm naive, or, you know, I'm living in like this utopia. No, I get it. I get it. But I also understand that we are very fortunate in 2022 to live in a world that is different from the ones that our grandparents lived in. Seriously. I mean, it's not perfect by any means, but it's better. I know it's better. I know it's better because we've worked hard to make it better. My son walks through his life very differently than my great-grandfather, God rest his soul, walked through his life for a number of different reasons. Okay? So I get it, but I do also, in that getting it, wonder if now might not be the time to at least begin to make the shift. To assume that things were going to continue to get better, and so maybe the old ways are not necessarily the most appropriate ways, not if we want to evolve. Gentle parenting calls for parents to extend empathy. I know how you feel. Empathy from parents can sometimes be difficult because it requires you to now dig deep into your own childhood. You got to start getting into those shadows to start to remember how things felt when you were young. I have to do that a lot with my son. And it's uncomfortable as hell because I spent a lot of years trying to get away from all of that stuff, to not have to deal with that so that I can continue and live a decent life. But having children requires that you do sometimes have to step back and remember so that you can empathize with them. And it also requires you to acknowledge the fact that you may be repeating some cycles, those same cycles, that those same things that damaged you, you may be doing, and it may very well damage your young one if you're not aware and you don't adjust your behavior. So empathy is important and it's difficult. Gentle parenting also requires that you respect your children. And ooh, that's something that we have a hard time with as well. Because in our community, it ain't nothing about respect them. Respect what? Respect what? They don't pay no bills up in here. Respect. They ought to respect me. I'm paying the bills up in here. I'm making sure they eat. I'm making sure they got clothes on their back. I'm the one responsible for them being here in the first place. I mean, despite the fact they didn't ask to be here, but I'm still responsible, despite the fact that this might not be a really good place for them to be. But I'm still the one responsible, and they ought to just respect me for it. I don't need to respect them. You earn respect. The children, I don't have to earn your respect. But you have to earn my respect. And quite honestly, for so many parents, there's nothing that a child will ever do as long as they are the child. or as long as they are the son and daughter, because I believe a child is a child for so long. But you are always your parent's son. You are always your parent's daughter. You are always your parent's non-binary person. So as long as that is the fact, I think there are a lot of parents out here who feel like they really don't even have to respect you. But it's so sad to see how wrong so many of them are. And they find out how wrong they are when they get old. And then they realize that, yes, their parents are afraid of them. Their children were afraid of them, but did not respect them. That's why they're sitting their old asses over there in the nursing homes and nobody comes to see them. There's no respect. Y'all know I'm right. So respecting your children actually benefits you in the long run, parents. Just a little something to think about, a little something to consider. It will benefit you in the long run. Twice a child, remember that. Understanding is another tenet of gentle parenting. And understanding actually comes with listening, creating space for children to express themselves, express how they feel. Respectfully now. Now, that whole thing I did about respect, it does not mean that your children should not be respectful, because they should. They should be respectful. So as they express the way that they feel, they've got to do it respectfully. And as parents, it's our job to teach them how to do it respectfully. You're not going to yell at me. You're not going to scream at me. You're not going to call me out of my name. You're going to go upstairs and calm down. And then when I come back up here in the next 15, 20 minutes, and you've taken a few deep breaths, we can talk about what's really going on. But you actually need to care, and you need to want to understand how they feel. How can you help a child if you don't even understand what is going on with them? That goes even back to empathy. You can't help anyone without at least understanding the challenge. It's impossible. If you ever go to, I'm not even going to use therapy. I'm just going to use, let's say, work. You know, I had some technical issues even at work the other day. So I called the IT department and I'm like, I'm having trouble doing this thing. And the IT department was like, okay, what exactly is the problem? Tell me what you did. Tell me what you want to happen, and then I can maybe help you fix this. But he had to understand the problem before he could help me fix it. And part of understanding the problem was listening to me describe what I had done up until that point and what wasn't working for me. And it's the same thing with our children, helping them solve problems, helping them grow, helping them evolve, helping them to become useful members of society requires that we understand the challenges that they face. And especially for those of you who may be raising children who are in a completely different generation. And I feel like I'm kind of talking to like grandparents who are raising Generation Z kids. Even maybe some of the older Generation Xers that are raising these Generation Z kids. Because their lives are so completely different. When I sit down and I listen to my son talk to me about his social circle, talk to me about the way he communicates with his friends, talk to me about the things that are important to him, I realize, yeah, it's very different. It's very, very different. And so while there are some universal laws and there's universal wisdom, yes, there may be some things that I don't quite understand. So I've got to be willing to listen to better understand where he's coming from. I think we would serve ourselves and our children well to consider some of these things. And there's so much more to it. But let me tell you this, I will be honest with you. Gentle parenting requires a lot of patience. And that's something that many of us do not have. And I don't know that it's any fault of our own that we don't have patience. Parenting is difficult. Now, I don't like getting into pissing contests about what's more difficult, being a mother or being a father. I don't know. I just am a mother, so I can only speak from my own perspective. Being a mother is hard, especially if you are a single mother, or you are, even if you're married, but like your spouse is not around. Maybe they're off working, or maybe they're just checked out. They're not present. It can be very difficult. And that hasn't changed in a long time. Matter of fact, I was listening to NPR the other day, and they did this story on mothers who are microdosing mushrooms in order to manage anxiety, stress, and depression. I mean, like, what is it, psilocybin? Like magic mushrooms. Now, these are micro doses of magic mushrooms, so they're not like going on these trips. But there's just enough that it kind of takes the edge off. And this is something that mothers have been trying to do, find things to take the edge off for so long. I mean, wine, that's why mothers love sitting around drinking wine at the end of the day. Oh, I got to get a glass of wine, because it takes the edge off. Cannabis, that's why there are a lot of mothers, especially in the last 5 years or so, particularly around the pandemic, a lot of mothers were using cannabis to deal with anxiety and depression. And then even before that, like in the 60s, mothers were taking Valium. Or was it Valium, whatever. They were taking that to kind of take the edge off. Because that's really what it was about. How do we take the edge off? It's never about how do we remove some of the pressure. How do we not just treat the anxiety, but like cure it? Now, granted, life is stressful. When I was a yoga teacher, I always say, don't try to eliminate stress. This is not about eliminating stress. This is about managing stress, because life is stressful. But there are things that you can do in the management of stress to eliminate stressors. But we don't have conversations like that when it comes to parenting. We really don't care about whether or not the mothers are overwhelmed. We just care about whether or not they can continue to do all this work while feeling overwhelmed. And that's why you have mothers who are smoking weed and taking magic mushrooms just to get through the day. So I get it. It can be hard. And that is what makes gentle parenting really challenging. But it may be time for us to stand up and face that challenge. If not for ourselves, for generations to come, for our children. If we teach our children another way, they'll teach their children another way. They'll teach their children another way. And imagine how happy our ancestors are looking down on us, seeing that all of their sacrifice and hard work is finally paying off. They can rest in heaven knowing that their great, great, great grandchildren don't have to endure the same trauma, not just from the outside world, but from their own families that they had to endure. Because some of your great, great, great grandparents, your great grandparents, your grandparents, your parents were miserable children because they were being raised by miserable people. Not all of us. I'm not even going to say most of us, but certainly some of us. So if you're one of those ones, I'm talking to you. Don't you think it's time? I don't know. Gentle parenting may be a start. There's something else, and then I'm going to leave you with this, that I was thinking about as I put this show together. And that is, whenever I wonder about the future, whenever I am doing the work toward improving the future, I now, and I've just started doing this over the last couple of years, go back first to the past. Now, I'm not talking about 100 years ago or 200 years ago or 300 years ago or 400 years ago even. I'm talking about back before our folks came into contact with white folks and their philosophies, their ideas, and their lives? How did we handle problems? How did we do things? How did we build families and communities before they came and told us that what we were doing was wrong, and then gave us a system that to this day still doesn't work for us? But I digress. I go back and get it. Sankofa, baby. That's what I'm doing these days. Sankofa. Going back and getting it. Matter of fact, I got a whole project on that coming. We'll talk about that another day. I go back and I get it. So I go back and I start to do research, real research this time, right? So I'm in book clubs, I'm taking classes, I'm studying with scholars, scholars of African history, culture. I'm learning. And one of the things that stood out to me in my research about how our ancestors raised their children prior to white folks, prior to capitalism, prior to colonization, prior to Christianity, one of the ways that they raised their children was the first thing they did was determine that child's purpose in life. They went to someone, a healer, a diviner, a spiritual leader, and that person was able to contact the spirits, whatever those spirits are in that community, to determine why that child was born to that family and into that community. And as soon as that was determined, the parents were given the job, the responsibility to ensure, along with everyone else in the community, that that child fulfilled their destiny. Which meant that those words, that idea, that purpose was whispered into their ear. In some cultures, in fact, I think it's in this book right here called The Spirit of Intimacy by Sobonfu Somé. She talks about, and even Patrice Somé, her husband, may have also written about it in his book. They talk about each child is given a song, and that song speaks to their destiny. And the parents are taught this song, and the parents sing this song to the child. Everyone who knows the child sings this song to the child, and then the child knows this is their song. And this song speaks to who they are and why they are here. Then when the child's name, even the name that they get, reminds the child of their destiny. Stay with me now. Then, as the child gets older and it's time for them to go through their rites of passage, the child is paired with someone who can mentor them. So if the child is meant to be an artist or a griot, they are mentored with the griot of the community. If they're a warrior, they are mentored by going off with the warriors. If they are healers, then they sit at the feet of the community healer. Even in their marriages, even in their coupling, they are coupled with people who complement them in such a way that their healing, that their purpose continues to grow and comes to pass. Do you hear what I'm saying to you? The child's purpose is never to serve only the child or only the parent. The child's purpose is not to serve the parent. The child's purpose is not to live a life so that the children can live so that the parents can live vicariously through them. The child's purpose is not to just work on behalf of on behalf of the parents. The child's purpose is not to make the parents proud. The child has his own purpose and destiny, and it's everyone's responsibility to make sure that he meets it. That's what we used to do back when we were thriving. Now, how do we do that these days when we don't have healers and divine? Ooh, we do have healers and diviners, but I know some of y'all ain't ready for that. So, what do we do when we are not ready to send Kofa back to our traditional ways. We're comfortable in this space we're in. Well, if you are interested in your child's purpose, ask them, what do you love to do? What sets your soul on fire? What makes you happy? What could you do all day long and never stop? Just, ask an age-appropriate question. And I guarantee you, your child will give you some insight into their destiny. And you may have to ask several times over the course of their lives. I try not to talk too much about my son. I believe that he has a right to privacy and protection and sovereignty over his own self and story, but I will share this with you. My son is a math genius. I have no idea where he got that from. I know it wasn't from my side of the family, so I'm assuming that must come from his father and them somewhere down the line. He's a math genius. He has a photographic memory. And he has had this since as long as, I've known him as a person, since he was a very young boy. So I always assumed that, he was probably destined to go into like some kind of engineering or science or something like that. Nope. That is not his destiny. Because there is another part of my son that is incredible. He is a magical child. When I tell you that child can make manifest anything. And he told me the other day, we were out, he said, he gave me this idea he had been thinking about. He said, this is kind of what I think I want to do with my life. I said, okay, let's do it. Now, is it what I would have chosen for him? I don't know, because I had never really chosen anything for him. But it's not what I thought of. It's not what I imagined for him. But my job as a parent is to provide him with space to grow into who he wants to be. And it took him about 16 years to figure that out. And so here we go, moving in that direction. And I learned that from my mother and my father, but especially my mother. Let me tell you something. If I had gone to my mother at 10 years old and said, Mom, I want to be a clown, she would have been like, bet, we about to find the best damn clown school in Detroit. Let's make it happen. That's always been, that's how it was. My mother never, ever pressured me to be anything other than what I wanted to be. Even to this day, when I'm coming up with 110 ideas, because I'm constantly thinking of ideas and I want to do this and I want to do that, she's like, okay, let me know how I can help. It's never, no, I don't think so. Because she trusts me enough. She knows I know myself. She knows I'm never going to come to her and be like, Ma, I want to be an engineer. She knows that's never going to happen. So any idea that I come up with isn't going to be crazy. It's going to be an idea that is actually in line with my purpose. But because I live in this world, like I live in this matrix, my purpose has to be attached to a job. So sometimes I'm always coming up with these different jobs to do. Y'all, you know what? I've said too much. That's a show for another day. What I want you to take from this conversation is simply this. A question. Is it time for us to begin thinking differently about parenting as Black folks? Are there other philosophies than the ones that we were raised with that we can apply to the work that we do as parenting so that our children can be better? And I haven't even begun to touch on the mental health aspect, because the original story, remember, was about a 15-year-old who was in a mental health crisis, who was having a breakdown. That in and of itself, that's a whole nother show. But let me tell you this, it starts with getting them help. There are resources out there. And listen, if you happen to be watching this and you are someone who knows of a resource to someone who may not have insurance, or if you are someone who provides a service, please do me a favor. Like, this is a community. Drop it in the comments for me, please. Go on over to my Instagram page. Again, I'm at ShaunaRenee_IG and put the information there. Okay? All right, so I'm going to close this out by saying thank you again for your patience. Inviting you to check this space, but do subscribe for me, though. I need you to subscribe, because that's when you'll know when the shows come. Because I think we are going to have to rough it until this Mercury retrograde is over. So we've got what? Couple more weeks. We've got a couple more weeks. Okay. All right. Any questions or comments, leave them in the comment section. I'll come back and check them out. Take care of yourselves, all right? But I also want you, please, to make sure that you take care of each other. Peace. Bye, y'all.